bring in Andrea Tanteros, political consultant, and Doug Burns to join this discussion, and Alicia Menendez, senior advisor for Washington think tank New Democratic Network, and also the daughter of New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez. Alicia, I'll start with you. First of all, in your opinion, do you think the school district was right to cancel this trip?
Listen, I think on some level we have to defer to the parents and to the students who are angry, and at the same time we entrust administrators to make the best decisions for our children. And in this case, I have to believe that she was doing what she thought was in the best interest. Now, listen, this is a much larger issue about immigration, about our federal government's inability to act, and we have a lot of innocent people who are getting caught up, you know, in this back and forth, the least of which is these students on this basketball team.
The school district saying that it's not in line with their values and their beliefs, this is the law of the land. That is what the Arizona law does.
It's the law of Arizona. It's not the law of the land. It's the law of Arizona.
Well, it's federal law as well.
You know what, Alicia? It is a federal crime to come here illegally. And if Democrats want to continue to coddle people and criminals that break the law, then you should just have your party repeal the federal law that's on the books. But isn't that the discussion we should be having? Isn't the real discussion how we're going to fix our broken immigration system not really about some girls playing basketball? But there's something called the 10th Amendment, and that allows Arizona to write its own laws that's good for Arizona. And these young girls should not be caught.
It's not good for Arizona, Andrea. This isn't making people safer. It's costing them a ton of money, and it's creating domestic problems. In a few months, they're going to realize this. You're right. Right now, the majority of Arizonans believe this.
I think Arizonans know what's best for them, not you or me, but...
All right, I'm going to bring Doug Burns into the discussion, former federal prosecutor.
Let me try to be the voice of reason a little bit.
You can try.
Now, first of all, this was an idiotic decision to cancel a high school basketball trip, which has absolutely nothing to do with Arizona, ostensibly. And for them to use the idiotic public relations maneuver of we're concerned for their safety.
Right.
Put that to the side. I will give some credence to what's being said on both sides here, however. Immigration is a federal law question. It is a federal crime to be here illegally.
Right.
So the more sophisticated question is, can a state then pile on with an additional state crime on that? And that's a fairly complicated question.
Or what about mirror an existing federal law?
Right, but they can already stop somebody on reasonable suspicion in Arizona under federal law for being here illegally. The problem is when you have a state reasonable suspicion standard, A, it's not going to work on the streets. You were a prosecutor. And B, there's nothing that would give off reasonable suspicion really other than your ethnicity. So there's huge problems in the way this is going to be implemented.
But what if they certainly see some kind of criminal behavior or activity, if they have an obligation to go over,
but that's different.
Cost to approach
that's totally different.
Right. But that's the law. If you're doing something wrong, if you run a stop sign, which is illegal, and you get pulled over, they're not pulling people over because they are tan or they happen to look a certain way.
Well, let me bring Michael back in.
That's the challenge with reasonable suspicion.
They could pull me over. They could pull you over.
Being undocumented in Arizona a crime, so how do you have reasonable suspicion to know if someone is or isn't undocumented?
But Alicia, if you're here illegally, you are breaking the law. That's what people keep forgetting.
She's saying you don't have a right to break the law. But I want to bring Dad back in. Michael, are you worried at all? I mean, your son isn't, to think that your daughter, her teammates, they're going to detain, they're going to pull over the basketball team? It just doesn't make sense.
And the unfortunate thing is this was not a mandatory trip. So it should have been up to the individual parent and individual children to decide, well, you know, if we feel for some reason we're not at risk in Arizona, we'll just skip this trip. I mean, this stuff needs to be decided in a court of law, not on a basketball court.
Well, what kind of lesson is that about being on a team? I mean, why would you want to go if one member of your team couldn't? Why would you want to put someone in the position of being that vulnerable to say, I think that I am at risk, but the rest of my team isn't?
But none of these girls are illegal aliens. None of these girls have citizenship issues. So what's the problem?
In my understanding, it's also about which girls would go in the following year, not knowing necessarily the full breadth of who would be on the team. And even if all of these women have papers, not feeling that they're going to be particularly safe.
That makes no sense.
How could this
that argument?
I'm willing to listen to reason, but I'm still having a hard time understanding that a supervised trip where these girls raised money to go on this trip, that they're afraid that they're going to be like detained and strip searched and held in some kind of immigration detention thing when they go to
away from the
Arizona?
Grand Canyon.
Just makes
then.
no
Also,
sense.
this is not a large, difficult, factual situation like thousands and thousands. You're talking
Right.
about a handful of 15. So it's not really all that hard to figure
Like
out.
girls in jerseys, the ones with the numbers on
When
the
they
back.
said, no,
Hoop star.
whether they have immigration problems,
Right.
that safety thing was just a loose, vague notion.
Well, it just doesn't give
mean-
credibility, you know, to the argument. Brian, I'm going to bring you back in. You talked to your sister about this. I mean, what does she say?
You know, she's disappointed. She really wanted to go on this trip, and you know, it's kind of blown up to be a more political battle over the immigration law itself, which, you know, she doesn't want it to be really about. She wants it to be about the fact that the process was flawed in who made this decision and how the decision was made. They feel, her and her friends feel, that they should have been involved in this decision-making process, seeing as it is their team that was going to partake in this tournament.
Yeah, you'd think in a democratic country that we would actually listen to the voices of the girls playing, the basketball players, and to their parents who are responsible for their personal safety. That's where the responsibility is, and not the school coming in and making these kind of sweeping decisions without consultation. It's really arrogant. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's all the time we have for this segment. Great discussion, everybody. Brian and Michael, thank you so much for being our special guests this evening. Alicia, Andrea, and Doug, thank you for joining me. And meanwhile, the